Who's,
Julie, this is Rod. The iPad went dead.
oh, okay. All right. That's why you're supposed to plug it in.
I did since I left the office
All
this afternoon.
That was Mark's. It goes dead quick. All right.
Okay.
All right. I think we're all ready.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to call the meeting of the Galleon City Council order. Here is May 12th, the regular meeting. Would you all please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for one nation, God, indivisible.
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You can please be seated. Okay, roll call, council members.
Mr. Baldinger,
Here.
Mr. Bodkins,
Here.
Ms. Earlston,
Here.
Dr. Fellner,
Here.
Mr. Ivy,
Here.
Mr. Richard,
Here.
Mr. Triplett.
Here.
All 7 present. The roll call of elected officials and safety service director.
Mayor Leary,
Here.
Auditor Trish,
Here.
Director of Law Palmer,
Here.
Treasurer Sparks,
Here.
Safety Service Director Ward.
Here.
Okay, recognition of department heads. I believe we have 2 with us tonight. Matt Eckleberry, communication director, and also Trish Factor from the health department. Any others that you know of? I don't see them at least. So, okay, moving on. You've all got a copy. I've read the minutes of the last meeting on April 28th. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the April 28th, 2020 regular meeting.
And Mr. Baldwin made the motion. Do we have a second?
Second that, Ken Bodkins.
Okay, Mr. Bodkin seconded. Are there any additions or corrections? If I hear none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Here the minutes of the April 28th meeting has been approved as presented. We also then moving on to, we have 4 additions we have to add to the agenda, the 4 that came out of meeting last night and so forth. First is ordinance 2020-30. Do I have motion?
29, we have 29 to add.
29, okay.
Yeah.
Must have missed one. Okay, 29, 2020, 29. Have a motion to approve, add that to the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 2020-29.
Mr. Baldinger made the motion to add that to the agenda. Do I hear a second?
I'll second. Ivy.
Okay, Mr. Ivy seconded. A roll call?
Mr. Baldinger,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins,
Yes.
Ms. Earlston,
Yes.
Dr. Fellner,
Yes.
Mr. Ivy,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Triplett.
Yes.
Okay, 2020-29 has been added to the agenda by 7-0 vote. Now the next one is ordinance 2020-30. Your motion?
I'll make a motion to add 2020-30.
Okay, that was Mr. Triplett. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Ms. Earlston seconded. Roll call?
Mr. Baldinger,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins,
Yes.
Ms. Earlston,
Yes.
Dr. Fellner,
Yes.
Mr. Ivy,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Triplett.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2020-30 has been added to the agenda by a 7-0 vote. Next is 2020-31. I hear a motion to add that to the agenda.
Carl, I'll make a motion to add 2020-31 to the agenda.
Mr. Richard, motion, hear a second.
I'll second that motion, Fellner.
Dr. Fellner seconded. Roll call?
Mr. Baldinger,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins,
Yes.
Ms. Earlston,
Yes.
Dr. Fellner,
Yes.
Mr. Ivy,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Triplett.
Yes.
The ordinance 2020-31 has been added to the agenda by a 7-0 vote. Next is 2020-32. Your motion?
We don't have 32. We have 10,
And we
resolution -10,
add the-
2020-10.
Okay, resolution 2020-10. Do I have a motion to add that to the agenda?
I'll make that motion to add resolution 2020-10 to the agenda.
Dr.
I'll-
Bell, motion seconded by
Aldinger, second the motion.
Mr. Baldinger. Roll call.
Mr. Baldinger,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins,
Yes.
Ms. Earlston,
Yes.
Dr. Fellner,
Yes.
Mr. Ivy,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Triplett.
Yes.
Okay, resolution 2020-10 has been added to the agenda by 7-0 vote. Now I need a motion to approve the agenda.
Carl. Hold on a minute. I got a couple questions here before we do that. We had two appropriations that didn't show up on here. One of them is the 20-28 for the Greenway project. And the other one was the Kobe Foundation monies for the roof at the cabin. Those didn't show up on this agenda tonight. I just wondered why.
Well, the 28, when we were at the meeting last night, they decided not to proceed with it because we already had the money appropriated.
Right.
That didn't come out of committee, and I guess the Kobe money is already appropriated either. Neither one of them needed to go further.
Oh, it didn't need to be appropriated?
I guess from what I was understanding from Brian, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to check before we went.
I thought that's what was said last night at the meeting.
Okay, yeah. I do remember now that the Harding Way, yeah,
And move on to ordinance 2020-25. This is second reading.
Carl, I'll make a
Oh.
motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Okay.
Excuse me. And by Mr. Triplett, seconded by
I'll second it. Fellner?
Dr. Fellner. Roll call.
No, it's all in favor?
All in favor then.
Aye.
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 I think we all voted. This
Yeah,
Getting things at the last minute is confusing.
yeah.
Are we ready to go to legislation? I think we are.
Yes.
Okay, starting with ordinance 2020-25, the second reading.
Ordinance number 2020-25, entitled ordinance repealing ordinance number 2020-15, and to now adopt a credit card policy for the city of Galion.
Okay, discussion on this ordinance? Who wants to start?
I'll start. Are we gonna have a limit on this credit card?
Brian, you want to do that, or Eunice? We discussed this last
It
meeting.
was my understanding that Thomas was going to address some things.
Okay.
Thomas, you're muted.
Hold on, I'm sorry, I hadn't unmuted myself. I thought you might want to answer Mark's question before we get into all of that. But the answer to your question, Mark, is under the proposed that you have before you, the maximum, it says the maximum limit for the use of a credit card or charge account will be determined by the auditor or their designee.
So can I ask a question then about that?
Go ahead.
In talking to Brian last night, I was wondering if yesterday, if we could, if there was going to be, if we were going to have a ballpark figure of what the limit would be for each department. And I know that's maybe not set up right now, but is there any ideas of what we might be having a limit for each department? Or was that the game plan? Was that the game plan that we were going to give a limit for each department?
Each department will have its own limits. That will be set.
It's our intention to do so.
It'll be set with the bank and us. The bottom line is, no matter what happens, each department still has to live within their budget that you guys approve. And they will still have to honor and go through the process of a purchase order to pay any bills for anything purchased on the credit card.
So even though they use a credit card, they still have to do a purchase order to pay the credit card bill? Gotcha. Okay.
Correct.
So why can't we have a limit on what the credit card can charge at one time?
Yes.
You want to answer that?
You want me to answer it, or I don't? I guess I'll answer it. I myself
Mark,
wouldn't even know at this point what each department credit would need, but with
Go ahead, Eunice Malthola, if you need to unmute right now.
okay. I wouldn't even know what each department would need, but we will work with the bank. And also, like I said, we'll look at the budget and everything for setting those. Also, with it being for emergency purposes, if an emergency would come up at one of the water plants, a pump goes out or something, have no idea how much those can run or what it could be, we would set the limits lower, not huge, anticipating something like that, but would want to have the ability that if something did go wrong, that we could change that without having to have a council. You guys will also get, and I can't remember how it's listed in here, if it's monthly or quarterly reports as to what the cards are and how much limit is on each card. You guys will get regular reports on that.
I see that it's quarterly.
Well, actually, there's a monthly requirement and a quarterly requirement, because the monthly requirement is what you guys get from the auditor's office. With the compliance, you would have a quarterly review with them, whoever that is.
Other questions?
I have another one. So Eunice, there will be a limit set for each department. It hasn't been determined yet. That will be set up with you guys in the bank. Will you guys then, will we be kind of informed of what that limit has been set up as, or?
Yes.
Okay.
And there will be,
Yes.
the card that we're looking at, the reporting capabilities online and stuff with this are the safety controls that they have on that end was a big draw. But the reporting capabilities that they have, until we get it and get into it, I really think that there's going to be a lot of reporting capabilities, and you guys will have good access to that.
Another question is, like you were giving an example of the, if the water, the water department needed a pump went out and they purchased that, the limit overall, could that cause a problem then if, say, the fire department needed to purchase something and we've already hit a limit with, the water department? Could that be a problem with the credit card?
Well, that was part of the issue with the $5,000 limit in there, but there will be a limit for each department. So the fire department is going to have one limit. The water department will have a different limit.
And the card would reflect, that wouldn't just be for us, that would be on the card.
Correct. Each card will have that and will reflect that, and you guys will get a report of that so that if there's any changes, you guys will know that.
Okay, I was imagining that was just a limit set through us, not through the card, but it's actually set through the card.
Right,
So
it is.
couldn't be okay. So that couldn't, so if the water department uses their limit, that's not going to reflect if the fire department would need to use it then. Okay.
Correct.
That makes sense.
Okay, I got another question, Carl.
Go ahead.
Council shall appoint a compliance officer who shall not be treasurer or fiscal officer. So are each of these people going to have to see the compliance officer to use the credit card?
The function of the compliance officer, am I muted again? Oh, no, I guess I'm
No.
not. The function, if, this is a good time, I think, Mr. Triplett, to kind of walk you through the procedural thing we've got here. You passed ordinance 2015, which adopted a credit card policy with a credit limit of $5,000. Everyone remembers
Correct.
that. Then you had before you tonight from committee and last week, a credit card policy, an ordinance with a credit card policy that would repeal the $5,000 limit. And basically it says, as I read a couple of minutes ago, the amounts of the limit would be set by the auditor and or their designee. What we are proposing this evening is an additional change. And this is what is after it says proposed changes to the credit card policy in your packet. So it's the third one you have there. And that's the one that you just read from, Mr. Triplett, that talks about council shall appoint a compliance officer. I just wanted to let you know that. But it then goes on to tell you exactly what the compliance officer's duties are. And these are the only duties that the compliance officer has. And that would be to review at least quarterly the number of cards and accounts issued, the number of active cards and accounts issued, the cards and accounts expiration dates, and the cards and accounts credit limits. So, and again, in addition to this is what I said a couple of minutes ago, in addition to the monthly reports you're going to get from the auditor, there will be a quarterly review that the compliance officer will be doing. That's what they do. That's the only thing the compliance officer is for.
Okay, so there's no, if I'm understanding this right, every department's going to have their own card.
I don't know if every department will, but those that have used credit or have the needs for reimbursement will.
So there's no control over when and how they use it.
There are.
Okay.
Everyone, as what's in here, there's a form that everyone has to sign and acknowledge that they've read the policy and they have to conform with what's in the policy. And there are also, again, one of the things with this card, and as I explained before, you can control, I mean, we wouldn't want to do this, but you could say that they cannot use it at a gas station. They can't use it at a bar. Can't use it at a restaurant, could use it at, somewhere else. Or you can say they can't use it at Kohl's. They can't use it at Target. It's the controls that are in place with it, like I said, is one of the things that kind of drew us to it, because there are restrictions that we can place on the card. And it can be individual, just like the departments.
Okay, so if they can't use it at a gas station, how's the argument of if the pumps go down and they need fuel?
I said we wouldn't want to do that. I was just using it as an example. That you can put all those controls in place, have one yes, one no. It just depends on how you want that set up.
Other questions?
Hey, Carl, this is Richard. Eunice, I have a question. First off, the compliance officer, do we have an idea who that would be? We know who it won't be.
Thomas, do you want?
Let me address that just for a moment. The compliance, it's kind of a technical issue here, but the compliance officer is something which is included in the statute,
right?
For communities, unlike Galleon, that have a mayor's court. And in those situations, it's the mayor that appoints the compliance officer. In this case, we are not a community that can have a mayor's court. We have a municipal court, which is seated in Galleon in addition to Bucyrus. For that reason, we don't have to have a compliance officer. Doesn't mean we can't have a compliance officer. So the language that you have currently before you in the proposal is that council would appoint it, but you could easily change that to be the mayor shall appoint. That's totally acceptable to be consistent with the other part of the code. It's council's prerogative is the bottom line.
I have another question, Carl. Is this custody and control model or is this compliance officer model?
As it will function, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't want to answer that. Who, did you ask that of, Mr. Triplett?
Whoever.
Oh, okay, then I will. It will function like a compliance officer model, even though we don't have to do that. That's the way that this is structured.
Okay, anybody else have any questions on this?
It's Ken Bodkins. I think everything is just up in the air right now. Nothing's really cut in stone. Don't know what's gonna happen.
I think Eunice has done quite a bit of research on this, and I don't know, unless you have other questions, I don't know what would be up in the air.
Seems like no one has made a decision. This is the way it should be, you know.
Mr. President,
Yes.
may I contribute? I don't see between now and the end of 2021, anyone who works for the mayor is going to be using a credit card. So you can do what you want with it and pass the policy, but as far as I'm concerned, we're not going to use the credit card. There's one department that I've talked to, and it's kind of interesting. Their main request is to utilize it to buy food in a more convenient manner. I think for the time being, I think the fire department has been able to purchase food for quite a long time in this community, and they haven't used a credit card. So I see I'm really not in favor of it, but council, the policy and stuff, that's really within your prerogative, but the monthly report and stuff that Mr. Palmer was talking about, all that stuff, it'll be a pretty small report because there'll be no activity between now and the end of 21. So anyways, we didn't ask for it, and a lot of time has been spent on it, and you can hold it to a second reading though, Mr. Bodkins, if you're not comfortable voting. But I don't want to be steered into it. We're not going to use it, so.
This is Ken Bodkins. I just don't believe we need it, really. I can't see a reason for it right now. We're running real good the way it is. Why don't we just leave it alone?
Can I ask, Brian, can you give us examples of times that a department would have needed a credit card? Maybe other than the fire department? Are there some examples that we could?
We have, I had to switch devices. I hope you can hear me. Can you? At this
Yeah, I
point?
can hear you a lot better now. Before I really couldn't, so that I'm glad.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I heard the entire meeting on that. To answer your question, we've used it to purchase items for the COVID issue on that. We've used it to purchase minor equipment for the street department. We've used it for the line department. It is used. If mayor's departments aren't going to use it, that's his prerogative.
Those are all of those departments. Let me just talk about one of them, Tammy. The line department. The service director had to use her personal credit card because the line department failed to order flags for Memorial Day last year. So a credit card, getting them a credit card, that ain't going to solve the underlying problem. We've solved the underlying problem. So it's interesting to me that people who don't purchase things for the city except travel are encouraging this so much. I really don't. It's very nominal. The COVID thing was an emergency purchase that was driven by the lack of availability of thermometers. It's very much what I would call exceptions, almost blue moon purchases. It's not the regular way. The purchase order system has been, use of credit cards was one of the fundamental things that caused the city. I know you weren't in the city, Eunice, but the credit card was a problem that led us into a problem. And I'm really have no interest in going back to that when the purchase order system, as Mr. Bodkins had pointed out, the purchase order system, it's worked all right. It's been one of the things that's allowed us to purchase with some predictability and with a good track record. So I'm really not, I do understand the fire department would like to be able to buy food more conveniently, but that's, for me, of the reasons we've used it, that would be the, not to be too disagreeable, Brian. And I said I really wouldn't get involved, but this got to be, we don't need it. And I don't think councilmen should be made to feel like they have to vote for this thing if they don't want to.
I would just like to note too, Tammy, to answer your question from my perspective. And first of all, it's not my decision. I don't care if we get a credit card or not. I just know from my position and what I have went through with my duties, there has been some issues. I don't know if anyone has spoke with the police chief or not. There has been at least one, maybe two incidents where he has had officers at training and the car broke down and they did not have a way to pay for it while they were there, where if they had the credit card, they could. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look through the payments if the officer did pay for it and then was reimbursed. But
excuse me, Mr. President, I might say we're not talking about giving a patrolman at training a credit card, are we? I thought the credit card was going to go to the department head. That's it. Now I hear an example given that the credit card would be in another town at training used. I guess I'm a little confused about it.
Well,
That
and
example that Eunice was going to use.
My
Pardon me?
understanding would be if the cruiser broke down, the chief could have called the repair shop and used the credit card then to pay for the repairs. I've also had emails from a couple of vendors that will not honor the purchase orders because they require a credit card. And at the past meeting, I gave examples of some of those vendors.
Yeah, the pump example is not a good one, and there are a lot of fish in the sea. We do not have to have our purchasing driven by a vendor who won't accept a purchase order system. So we're going to disagree about that probably. I don't know if you got the votes to suspend the rules, but got quite an agenda here.
Can I ask you, Mr. Mayor, when you talked about the credit card getting us into trouble last time, were there any guidelines or stipulations on it the last time that you know of? Do you know if they?
Yeah, it would be really instructive. Yeah, I think for all council members to read the report from the state auditor when we were given sort of directions on coming out of fiscal emergency. There's about 4 pages on credit cards, 4 or 5 pages, examples of misuse of credit cards. It was actually only one of the only things that there was recovery for a misuse of city finances around the credit card. That's probably the best thing about it. It produced a paper trail that was bulletproof. So I just don't want to get into it, Tammy. I mean, I'm not into the discussion about it. I don't want to get back into credit card purchasing. I don't see any I'm not moved by those examples. And it was mentioned, did you talk to the police chief? Yeah, I sure did.
Any other council members have any comments on this?
I feel like doing business in 2020 requires that we have one. I know I just feel like it's not going to replace the current system. It's going to be an adjunct. I believe we can be fiscally responsible and have both systems. One isn't going to supersede the other. The purchase order system will not go the way of the horse and buggy.
Other councilmen?
Hey, Carl, this is Mike Richard.
Yes.
Question for either Brian or Eunice. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand part of the reason why this came up in the first place was that the auditor advised us because we had a for lack of a better term, charge account with folks like Lowe's and them, that we were being told that we needed some type of policy in place. Am I correct or not?
Ryan? Eunice?
Eunice, I'm having some technical problems. Eunice, would you answer that?
When we go through audit, we've been questioned by, in this case, we've had Perry and Associates doing our audits, and they have questioned us on our policy with our charge accounts. So regardless if we get a credit card or not, there has to be some sort of policy because we have those accounts.
Are you saying because you use credit cards regardless, you just use other people's? So there has to be a policy in place for use of a credit card, whether we get one or not?
No, it's the Lowe's account. It's the Lowe's account she's referring to that is pointed out in the Perry and Associates audit.
May I finish? It wasn't just Lowe's. And I am not sure if Lowe's is actually classified as a credit card.
It's
At
not.
the last meeting. Okay.
So let me get this straight then. The auditor it's not any type of citation or anything. What they're asking for us is to have some type of policy in place related to cards. Is that take from this conversation? Sorry, my voice is going.
I will defer to Thomas on that, other than stating that in February of 2019, a policy was required at that time if we didn't have one, that one was to be established in February of 19. Thomas, I don't know if you want to add to that or have any other thoughts.
Well, all I would say that is the bulletin that I think that was distributed to all council members, was it not, Eunice? I'm not sure of that. But the bulletin that was done by the Ohio Auditor's Office lists the types of accounts which are considered to be credit card accounts, even though they may not have that name. And so I would encourage council members perhaps to look at those. I don't have that in front of me, but I believe that would refer to things that may not have the name credit card, but function in a credit card kind of way. I don't know whether that encompasses something like the Lowe's account, which, as I understand, is just like a store charge. But that's, it's statutory. If we have the kinds of accounts that are listed in the statute, then we have to have the policy to back those up.
Thomas, I'm looking at that House Bill 312, and I don't see anything where it lists any kind of account except a credit card that you need to have a policy.
I'm looking to see if I have that page, Mark. Hold on.
I think he's looking on the very front of the auditor's bulletin where it says.
Yeah, he would be in the definition section. It means any bank issued credit card account, store issued credit card account, or any other card or credit account. That's where it probably gets into it. Allowing the holder to purchase goods or services on credit or to transact with the account in any debit or gift card account. So that's the catch-all. There are some exceptions that are listed, but that's in the same thing you're looking at, Mr. Triplett. So the question would be, do we have accounts that fit those rubrics in that statute? If we do, then they're classified as credit card accounts that necessitate us having a policy. I'm not saying we do have, I'm just telling you that's where to look.
Okay, on this same House bill, it says procurement card account, which that would be Lowe's, correct?
I'm not an expert in that sort of thing, Mark, but yes, I understand what you're saying.
So a procurement, gasoline card, telephone card, any card similar to gasoline, telephone, where a merchant category code limiting type of good is exempt.
What I don't know, Mark, is that you might have, I'm not suggesting that council delay this or anything for more research, but it might be helpful to list all the accounts the city currently has to see if any of them actually fit within this.
I'm fine with the policy as long as we don't have credit cards. We can have a policy.
Yep.
But we don't need a credit card.
Who's talking?
Anybody else?
That's Ken Bodkins. I'd like to agree with Mr. Triplett. I don't believe we need a credit card. I really don't. Personal opinion.
Goes on to a third reading then.
Yes. If there's no other questions or discussion, we'll consider the second reading and move on. It'll have to be a final decision 2 weeks from tonight or next meeting. So, okay. Any questions you have in the meantime, maybe we could research it more, but there's been quite a bit of research done on it already. Next is ordinance 2020-27, first reading.
Ordinance number 2020-27, entitled ordinance approving and authorizing the mayor to enter into a partnership agreement between Crawford County and the cities of Galion and Bucyrus for the program year 2020 CHIP grant program and declaring an emergency.
Okay, discussion on this?
Yeah, Carl, that come through finance last night. This here is the CHIP grant. This is kind of a, I guess you want to say, an annual thing or a housekeeping thing that that happens every year. The mayor indicated last night that there was one slight change. So I'm going to refer to him to clarify what that slight change was in this ordinance for the year.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I would say that the players, the partners remain the same. That would be the county, the city of Bucyrus, the city of Galion. Who we're partnering with is what is changed, and the commissioners have made a decision to have that CHIP grant administered by Great Lakes Community Action Commission. So that's really what this is, the new partnering agreement for the new round of CHIP grants that will be administered. If it's Great Lakes is their name now. It's WSOS. If you go back over many decades, they've really been in the housing business and for quite a while, and I'm excited about working with them. Although the CHIP funds have been accessible to Galion people in the past, that's really what this is, and it doesn't require suspension of the rules tonight. If we just want to ask some questions and then move on.
Who was the previous administrator, Tom?
ORDC, that Ohio Regional Development Corporation out of Coshocton.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the gentleman's name that?
Yeah, that's run by a guy named Dale Hartle.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyways, commissioners made a decision to change that. We'll see if they changed their CDBG block grant. They were the ones that administered that Uptown grant for us, that we had a lot of us had some heartburn over the way that was administered. So
right.
I'm not sure if the commissioners will stay with ORDC for any kind of CDBG competitive and or the formula money. But we didn't have particularly good luck with ORDC on that.
Right.
How soon does this have to be agreed upon, Mayor? Do you know?
Yeah, Matt, what do you got on that?
Carl, we have until the middle of June.
Okay.
Matt, the answer man. So
not to suspend the rules tonight, but are there any opposition to this change? It's really a yearly deal, and change of administrator. The mayor has explained that. You want to leave it go to the second reading, or do you want to suspend the rules on this and move on?
Carl, this is Mike Richard. I think, like Mr. Baldinger mentioned, this is a housekeeping type of legislation, as the mayor indicated, it has been and will be beneficial. So at this time, I would like to make a motion to suspend rules on ordinance 2020 sorry, went to the first one. Just a second. Suspend the rules on 2020.
27.
20, thank you, Julie. And move it to the final reading.
You've heard the motion by Mr. Richard to suspend the rule. Do I hear a second?
In second.
Mr. Bodkin seconded. Roll call.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins,
Yes.
Ms. Earlston,
Yes.
Dr. Fellner,
Yes.
Mr. Ivy,
Yes.
Mr. Triplett,
Yes.
Mr. Baldinger,
Yes.
Motion to suspend the rules passed by 7-0 vote. Discussion on the ordinance.
I'll make a motion to pass ordinance 2020-27.
Heard the motion to pass the ordinance by Mr. Triplett. Do I hear a second?
Second.
That was by,
Bodkin.
okay, Mr. Bodkins. A discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Triplett,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins,
Yes.
Ms. Earlston,
Yes.
Dr. Fellner,
Yes.
Mr. Ivy,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Baldinger,
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2020-27 is passed by 7-0 vote. Moving on to ordinance 2020-29, first reading.
ordinance number 2020-29, entitled Ordinance Authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into an agreement between the City of Galion and the Galion Port Authority for administration of a loan program and declaring an emergency.
You heard the reading of the ordinance. Do I hear a discussion now?
Yes, Carl, this is Gail. This also was discussed in Finance Committee last night, and it was agreed upon to have this brought up. And put it on the agenda for tonight. So I'm going to defer to whomever may want it. I don't know if it'll be the mayor or who's going to want this.
Thanks, Gail. I'll go ahead and I believe there are 2 or 3 members of the Port Authority. I think they can offer in if they want to at one point, at any point. I think Thomas and if Julie worked together on this, they did a real good job pulling this loan program, the idea together into an ordinance. And I think there is concurrence among everyone that I've heard had the idea shared with them that this is a good idea and we should move out on it. In talking with the Port Board this morning, I mentioned that council had expressed a preference to have those proceeds returned, asked the port to loan the money out, but have the money pay back to the city. I offered at that meeting that if they had problems with that, I could understand that. And if they had some concerns about that or a different way of doing it, that they should, attend the meeting tonight. I almost said come to the meeting tonight, attend the meeting tonight and explain, why they believe it would be a good idea to have the money retained by the port and then used as a revolving loan fund going forward. Last thing I'd say about it before we get into discussion is I'm inclined to think that although we have an immediate need to provide some local money for business development, that if the money was paid back to the port, that could provide a continuing and ongoing source of financial assistance for local business. So that's an editorial comment at the end and kind of a summary of what 2029 is.
So will the Port Authority members here, would any of you like to make comments on this? Mr. Miller, Mr. Steiger?
Yeah, sure. So if I could chime in, at the meeting this morning, we discussed this in quite a lot of detail, and I think that we felt it would be an extremely beneficial tool for the community at this time. We also felt like this could be an enormous opportunity for the community moving forward. So as you know, the Port Authority would prefer that the funds stay with the port, designated to a community loan program, you know, so that we could continue something like this in the future. It might not be the same as it is today with the emergency that's going on, but it would always, those funds would always stay dedicated to that purpose. I know the mayor mentioned that there might be some concern as to what those funds would be used for. Those funds would always be earmarked for some type of revolving community loan program. And, you know, we think that this would be right up the alley of the reason the port was created, to spur economic development. I know that, you know, my personal experience in banking, there's a lot of times where small businesses are seeking financing for different projects, and they might not have the capital necessary to satisfy down payments or things like that for traditional lenders. This would be a program that in the future could provide some support for those individuals. And I know that the port has also agreed at the meeting this morning that as those funds are still set aside, at any point in time, the Port Authority is no longer exists, or this program no longer becomes necessary, we would make it part of any contractual agreement with the city to return those funds back to the city at that point in time.
For those council members that wasn't in on the meeting last night, the mayor, would you like to explain where these funds would be coming from?
Yeah, I would, Carl, I'll do two things. One, I will do that. What we had hoped when the idea was percolating was that we could utilize the capital improvements fund. And as it turns out, that was, I think absolutely not might have been the state auditor's words when she replied to Brian. So Belinda Miller didn't think it was a very good idea to use those funds. I don't think it's a good idea to argue with the state. I think the good idea is to get the money so businesses could use them. So we went from using the $300,000 that's in the capital improvements fund. Again, just briefly, that came from the sale of the old HTI building, and that represents a partial payment of that purchase price. So that got scrapped, and because I think there's agreement among a lot of people, business community and people at City Hall, that this is something we need to do. I offered up the idea of the committee, and they were receptive of taking appropriation authority that we have at the depot. We'd already frozen projects at the depot because of the financial uncertainty and all that we're going through, and take money out of the mayor's technical services, the contract services line, and together put together, I believe the ordinance says $190,000. So that's really where the money's going to come from. My hope is that money goes relatively fast. We won't know until the legislation passes, hopefully, and the port starts to do some lending. The terms, if I might, Carl, just to explain what I believe it's in the attachment that Mr. Palmer drafted that's in the ordinance. These would be 1-year loans, 0 interest, or 12 months, same as cash. Any unpaid balance then would be converted into an amortized loan. That'd be worked out with the port. They would max out at $5,000. They would be eligible businesses would be existing galleon businesses. We don't want to, there are some businesses that are maybe going to start up in the next few months. They might need the money too, but the idea is to assist businesses that were knocked off their feet by the abrupt closure, assist them in getting back into business. So 12 months, same as cash, convert over after that. I believe that the port could charge a small fee to process the loan, but we don't want to we don't want it to be a sort of a banking product where there's a high fee and then there's an annual service agreement. This would be really trying to get those cash/loan dollars out as quickly as possible. I think those are the only conditions. I might have left one out.
Mr. President,
Yes.
just piggybacking on what the mayor just said, absolutely spot on. I just wanted to give you the framework for your conversation. The first agreement which you have there is one that would return the money back to the city after the loan proceeds were received from the people to whom it was loaned by the Port Authority. And it would have those conditions that the mayor just mentioned, $5,000 cap. It would have to be, and this is an important thing too, it would have to be for job creation or retention. But I think that's pretty self-evident, but it needs to be that for the city to be involved. And then the 12-month same as cash. Now, the second one you have there, which is in red, would change that to a revolving loan fund. And as the mayor and I talked this afternoon, this changes the terms as well. So the money that comes back in, you want to call it the second and third generation of loans, those same restrictions in terms of 12 months same as cash and the $5,000 cap do not apply. That's the way that this is written.
Right.
There you go.
Couple questions, Mr. President. Tom, one's for you.
Mm-hmm.
How would the money then taken from your contractual and the depot be replenished if it stayed with the port?
If the state would reimburse the port, I think you broke up a little at the very end.
Okay, to reimburse the money from for the depot and
Right.
for your contractual funds, how would those get replaced?
I don't know. Mark, I don't know if they would. I think we would basically trade off $100,000 worth of depot improvements or setting on some of our reserve balances. The money that goes back into the contract service, that would be spending authority that's gone and wouldn't necessarily be replenished. I think we'd be better off though if we had this loan program than we would if we did some additional incremental improvements in the depot, or if we use that money to do contract services in the mayor's office. What we're going to not do are some engineering projects. We deprogrammed a couple of blanket purchase orders. It seems to me we made a decision not to fund one other activity in that contract services.
Okay, I think
So the
it's a
short
good
answer is the money would not be spent for contract services in the mayor's office or at the depot, and instead would be spent on giving these restart loans to existing businesses.
Well, I agree. I think it's a good idea to help the local business, but as long as the money wouldn't go to corporate, like McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Pizza Hut. Sorry,
Rod. Yeah, I think one of the reasons the $5,000, it makes sense for local businesses. It's probably not, I don't want to sound funny, but it's probably not worth a corporate entity coming swooping in for $5,000. So we and that number didn't fall out of the sky. Talked to a handful or more of local businesses and got feedback. Some saying 5 was, 2,000 would be enough, and others saying it might 7,500. So there's nothing magic about 5,000, but I think it will make a difference for a lot of these independently owned businesses. That's the whole purpose of it, not just Uptown, but commercial businesses generally. It wouldn't make any sense to a manufacturing firm, I don't think.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor,
Question?
Oh,
Good be. Go ahead, Tammy.
Do we have any rough idea of the percent administrative fee that could be retained by the Port Authority?
Yeah, we had talked about a max of 3%, Tammy. So if you got $5,000, it'd be a $150 application fee.
Okay.
I think that's, I don't know if it's exactly cost based, but it would pay. And I believe if this goes through, the port intends to hire former county auditor Robin Hildebrand, who is helping them set up their financial bookkeeping to I'd be the administrator, such as it is on that. So it's somebody, I think, heck, most of us that are on this call voted for. You didn't have any choice for about 4 election cycles, so she ran unopposed for quite a while. I think she represents somebody that I believe is well respected and is a disinterested party. It's not a local person making choices between one local business and another. So I think if she agrees to, if we pass this and she agrees to serve, I think it sets it up for a real solid program.
Thank you.
May I address one other thing, Carl?
Yeah, go ahead.
It wasn't brought up, but we looked at, and I think Thomas believes that it is within the law for us to have to propose setting this up within City Hall, a City of Galleon loan program. It's just any number of conflict of interests that may come up in that kind of thing. When you look at the nepotism tree, you look at all sorts of things. There are many people involved in city government who either own a business or have a family member in a business. They would be, I would almost would have to say they would be ineligible.
Yes.
One thing about making this independent at the port is that people, and I'm not talking about one person, as I've thought about mentioning this, there's 2 or 3 people on the phone call that may have a business that they have a relative that is that would be ineligible if we did it, that I don't believe would be in a conflict position if the money goes to the port. So I just want to mention that there's only so many leaders and so many people that run for office, and sometimes you get yourself disqualified just trying to do a public service. This arrangement would limit any kind of conflict that a city official might worry about.
Mr.
Do you
President,
concur, Thomas?
I concur 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
I don't want to get anybody in trouble, you know? That's not the idea. It's to try to have the commercial district have a fighting chance over the next 60, 90 days. I think this could make a difference. Of course, you wouldn't have to apply. I know business is made to apply, but I think there's enough in the ordinance. The 190,000 may not be all that we need, but it certainly is. It's a lot of money. I don't think we gave away 190,000 in that block grant fiasco a couple summers ago. So that, give you an idea of what the marketplace might be. We didn't have 190 to give away on that CDBG. So,
Mr. Mayor, this is Tom Fellner. Yesterday in the committee meeting, you mentioned that the State House is also considering the distribution of some CARES funding to the cities, and that might be a way to answer Mr. Triplett's question as to recouping some of the funds or fund that were drawn down with this idea. So while it's not 100%, there may be a chance that that could be a source of, and then let the Port Authority have that revolving money pool.
yeah, that's a excellent point. You're 100% right about. I thought about muddying the water when Mark asked that question, but I thought what I know for sure is that spending authority will transfer from depot and consultants or contracts in the mayor's office, engineering and such, into this. You're 100% right, and I spent a time again today trying to understand why the General Assembly has, and it's the House that's failed to take up the Senate passed version, which allocates, and people were on the call last night, allocates about 25% of all that Ohio was given for local governments in the CARES Act. So the money that I wish they would cut loose is only 25% of all that we're entitled to. Now, I don't want to prolong this much longer, but if you followed today, there is quite a discussion in Washington about allowing these same funds to be used for non-COVID expenses. The argument being that local governments' revenues, state governments' revenues are shrinking, and they want to be able to use these funds to substitute for lost salaries and existing city services. The first chunk that the Senate passed is strictly for COVID-related activity. And so that's, I just wish they'd cut that loose. We have two real good uses for COVID-related activities. One will end up, when we're going to go ahead, I think at the committee's recommendation to go ahead with the health department, but I'd like to see some of this COVID money go to the business program, and another chunk go to hire contract tracers. So we'll maybe get to that in a minute, but those are the dollars that we really should be getting from Columbus through Bucyrus to Galleon, that can go perhaps to offset, and back to Mark's question, reimburse some of the existing initial appropriation.
Mr. President,
Yes.
this is Gabe.
Good.
Last night, it was the desire of my committee and the intent of the committee for this to be the agreement number one on here, where the money would be restored back to the funds that it was removed from, so we could continue on with future renovations and projects that were scheduled. I know they'd be put on hold until the money came back, but the intent is that the money would come back so we could continue these projects. Now we're talking about taking money away and never having it again to use. And that was not our intent when we talked about this last night.
I got a question, Mr. President, for Brian or Tom or how's May's revenues under this emergency?
Oh, it's a totally different question, Mark. I'm going to take a swing at it first. It is remarkable how uneven the declines have been just within communities in Crawford County. So after the meeting, if you pull your pad up and you look at revenue, our revenue is right on where we would expect it to be based on our initial estimate. In income tax, I've been almost over the top in thanking our utility customers for making good on their bills. So that's holding its own. The only thing that is seen some shrinkage is gas tax. And we're estimating, Brian, I think thinks it's about 70, I might think it's closer to 80,000 that will experience in terms of shrinkage of gas tax. But income tax is remarkably strong. I almost hate to analyze it or talk too much about it.
Okay, that just leads to my other point, that just so we don't have to get in the same situation in Mansfield and cut some emergency services.
Oh, yeah. No, I would never have prioritize using general fund appropriation to fund this either on a revolving loan basis or a one-time shot in the arm, whichever council decides, if I thought we were going to jeopardize that. In fact, I had a conversation with the police chief who we have a couple of vacancies due to resignations. I'm probably guilty of slow peddling that. But we want to make sure the revenue doesn't take a dip on us so that we get ourselves in a position where we've given generous contracts to hardworking people and then we have to start laying them off. So very sensitive to that. And that won't happen for certain this year unless for some reason from today forward, we have a major drop in employment.
Just as a comment to reinforce that, the mayor's exactly right. We have been, our utilities have been just where they need to be. And income tax, yes, we've seen a slight decline, but I'm confident in the July payment when everybody has to pay their taxes, we will make most, if not all of that back. But we're in very solid shape. I don't think, Mr. Triplett, we're anywhere close to the Mansfield situation.
Yeah, I didn't even. Yeah, if I might just add one more thing onto that, because I know this is becoming a long meeting. Brian's right. We're a little off his estimate, but I didn't check today, but I suspect where we're at today in collections is real similar to where we were a year ago, because we had a small 2% increase in the estimate for this year's revenue. We kind of hoped and thought income would grow. I think it's ridiculously flat, 20 compared to 19. Brian, would you?
It's within 1.5%. Yeah.
Yeah, but not of the growth. Heck, it's yeah. Okay, I don't want to argue, but it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
The other thing to look at for council to look at is take a look at the fund balance report at the beginning of the month. In the general fund, we've collected more than we've spent in the general fund. Now that'll even out. There's a big transfer to be made into the street fund and some other things, but they're the unexpended cash, not the unencumbered cash, but the unexpended cash is higher today than it was at the beginning of the year. So kind of go figure. Count your lucky stars or knock on wood or whatever superstition, but we're holding our own, and one can only hope that the economy will kick back into gear. And if we have a reduction in employment, we'll kind of be lagging instead of a leading indicator of where the economy is. So anyway,
Mr. President.
Yes.
Fellner, back to Mr. Baldinger's point about the committee decision last night versus the added option. I'm of the opinion that either scenario is an acceptable solution. I'd like to see something happen this evening to make that go. So I'd like input from the other members as to is it going to be reimbursement back to the city or a revolving loan fund for the Port Authority with the hope that we could get some reimbursement from the CARES money for the cities.
Okay, who wants to go first?
I'll start with that, Carl. This is Gail. I prefer we stay with the reimbursement as we talked last night for now, because this is two completely different scenarios. And if after we're through this and we feel the need for a revolving loan fund again, that could be another issue for another time, providing we have funding to do that. As the mayor said, that money may not be able to replenish what we're where we're pulling that money from, being COVID money, we may have to use it in different areas. So until, I think we're just muddying the waters. I think we need to stay with what we talked about last night for now, and then move forward after this crisis is over, providing we have enough funding to do a revolving loan at that time.
Just that it's really your prerogative, and I want to get it done. I would like to mention just quickly on the appropriation, the money is going to pay back in 2021. So, you know, as the loans become mature a year from, you know, let's say June 1st or whenever they start to go out the door, we really won't see that. So the recharging of the appropriation, say back to the depot or back to the mayor's office, that won't happen in quite that way. It'll be gone. The spending authority will be gone in 2020. The revenue will book, if that's how it's done, and the port wants to go ahead and administer it that way, then it'll come back in and be showed as general fund revenue in next year's 2021 budget.
Yeah, I agree with that, but that's also revenue that would be available that could be put back into those respective funds at that time.
That's true. That's true.
In the budget, that could be replenished at that time.
Who wants to go next?
I'll go. I always feel uncomfortable kind of counting on reimbursement coming from like the CARES Act or something without knowing that we're going to be getting that, just kind of, you know, planning on it and not actually knowing. So I think having said that, I kind of agree with Mr. Baldinger.
Anybody else?
Earl, this is Richard. I have to agree with both Harrelson and Mr. Baldinger. The premise of this ordinance to me seems to be to help our current businesses that may, for lack of a better term, fall through the cracks. So I think that while the idea of a revolving type of loan program would possibly be beneficial, I think that's something that should be visited in a future time, possibly. I think I am more in favor with the original premise of this, which is to get those funds out to those folks or make it available to those folks, and then subsequently have it come back to the city.
I think as a point well taken, now's the time they're gonna need the money to start back up. We need to make some decision here, one way or the other. And as far as the depot, right now it's decided not to spend the $100,000 down there anyhow. If it was decided not to be reimbursed, I think as long as council looked in the future to address that in the next budget or something, because the city's already got a lot of money involved in that depot, and just to have it stop, no. Future developments, improvements might not be there. So that's my comment. Anybody else?
What does the port think about this? Are they going to administer it with a return?
That would be something we'd have to look at as a board for future discussion. We had sort of just been presented with this idea today. We thought it was a great chance for the city and the port to work together, not only right now to help small businesses in Galion, but sort of in perpetuity. So what we'd have to really look at, Mark, to answer your question, is we're going to have to look at what the actual costs are going to be to administer this program. We were talking about a really small 3% fee, and I'm not saying it'll go above that either. You know, the port's already been constrained with the amount of funds that we have available to use. So we would absolutely need to make sure that without it being retained at the port, that we have enough funds to cover the expenses that we're going to incur to administer this program. And then, you know, so I guess we'd have to meet again to agree on that, because what we had formulated today was the second scenario where these funds were going to remain with support for an ongoing facility.
Thanks, Chad.
Remember, we cut the amount when this first started in late March. We had in our last meeting that we were present in council chambers, we reduced the amount of funding to the Port Authority already. I think, again, either scenario is fine. I'm going to vote regardless, but I do give equal weight to the port idea as well as the port retention of the funds in a revolving a loan fund, just because we did, again, for one of the reasons that we did short them in March.
Yeah,
I was going to mention that, excuse me, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, just one thing I want to do on that. Yes, we only give them half of what we were going to give them, but we also didn't promise them or commit, but we also told them once this was over with that we would revisit that and give them the rest of their money after this crisis was over. That would be revisited afterwards. So they're still subject, but not promised to have the rest of their money after this COVID is over with, and we see how we fare out here financially. And this kind of falls in the same thing. We need to get through this and see where we're at. The port is going to have $190,000. If they have some expenses administrating this, then it's probably just going to reduce the number of businesses that could possibly benefit from this. And I don't think that would be a major enough expense that it wouldn't drop off from what we thought would be 40 businesses. That was at 200,000 last night. So
Well, I would say, yeah.
We're probably.
I'm sorry to cut you off. The fee, the way the ordinance is drafted, they're constrained to that 3%.
No, actually not, Tom. It's left blank. I did that on purpose.
Okay, so it's not 3%, it's 0%, and then
No,
that would
it's
be
left-
negotiated.
It's to be negotiated. It's literally a blank.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I would make other comment about it. I don't have a vote in this. If I did, I would vote to create the revolving loan fund, but I don't. I ran for a different office. The other thing that I would say is that if we expect the Port Authority to function well in this city, we can't turn them into a loan processor with no payout, and we can't fund them half of what we thought we had. So this is kind of twice in a row the city has said to the port, you're important, but we're going to give you half the money in one case and we want our money back in the other case. The other thing I would just point out, it's real important that council looks at, I would like to get this done. We don't need to be here till midnight, but you really need to look at the fund balance. You got $7 million in the general fund. $7 million in the general fund. So I think this would be a good time to keep that money there, but getting the money out is a good idea. I don't want to have it eaten up in a bunch of fees. I want the processing fee to be limited. So that's all I really, getting the money moving is the main thing.
I think we need a motion here to get this thing going one way or the other, like the mayor says. I'm not too sure we got if it's gonna be, the fund's gonna be retained by the Port Authority, that we have enough to suspend the rules tonight, because 3 spoke out against that. So I don't know, where do we go from here? We need a motion to begin with.
Mr. Palmer, may I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
So in the proposed legislation, there are two scenarios. Hypothetically, if a motion was made for one of the scenarios and did not pass, would that kill the entire legislation? Or could there be another motion to pass the second scenario?
Okay, let me try and work you through this. First of all, you have the consideration of whether or not to suspend the rules. Secondly, you have something which you voted on the agenda, which would have been the first of those alternatives, which is the one that would be the limited loan program and the return of money to the city. If you wanted to go to the other one, the second one, you would need to amend that agreement to include the language which is in red and put that in its place. So, number one question is, you want to suspend the rules. Number two question is, if you want to move forward with the as it is, which is the one with the one-time only return of money loan program, then you just need a motion to approve the agreement or the ordinance and a vote on that. But if you want to approve the second one, which is a revolving loan fund, you need a motion to amend.
Would we have to do the motion to amend first or do the suspension of the rules first?
Amend first.
Amendment first.
Yes, because you need to know what you're suspending the rules on.
Why I asked. Thanks.
We don't have the votes to suspend the rules. That we don't have the votes to amend the ordinance as presented. We can amend the ordinance, but we won't be able to suspend the rules on that amended ordinance. That's when you sort of count noses, that's what you have. At best, you'd have 4 votes to go to a revolving loan fund, but you're not going to have 6 votes to be able to suspend the rules. So if the primary objective is to get this money closer to being in a position to help Galion businesses, then we need not to amend it, and we just need to vote it straight through. Then we'll see whether the port is inclined at some percentage, is willing to administer the program for us. I think that's kind of where we end up. It's not where I'd like to end up, but I'd rather end that up there than in a pile of twisted metal on the side of the road. So I think we don't want to have a crack up on this. And hopefully the port will see its way through to go ahead and administer this for just a small fee.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules and proceed to the final reading on ordinance 20-29 as it is written coming out of committee last night.
Yes.
You've heard the motion by Dr. Fellner to suspend the rules on this ordinance. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Earlston seconded. Roll call.
Dr. Fellner,
Yes.
Ms. Earlston.
Yes.
Mr. Ivy,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Triplett,
Yes.
Mr. Baldinger,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins.
Yes.
Okay, passed by 7-0 vote. Now discussion on the ordinance.
Mr. President, this is Richard. Question for Mr. Palmer. With that open-ended or percentage, that way, or do we have to plug in something there?
You can leave it open-ended, and it would be the subject of negotiation between the Port Authority and your contracting agent, which is technically Nikki. so the mayor's office.
Okay.
And it's like Gail said, Michael, that whatever that fee ends up being, if they'll agree to a negotiated fee, that would come out of the 190.
Right. I understand. Unless somebody else has any objections or comments, I'd like to make it and to move to approve ordinance 2020-29.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Richards, seconded by Mr. Ivy, was it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, discussion? Okay, roll call, Julie.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Ivy,
Yes.
Mr. Triplett,
Yes.
Mr. Baldinger,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins,
Yes.
Ms. Earlston,
Yes.
Dr. Fellner.
Yes.
Okay, it passed by 7-0 vote. It was critical to get this passed, to get the money transferred, get it out to the business opening up. You can always look at this at a later date to make any tweaks or changes on it. Okay, thank you. Next, moving on to ordinance 2020-30, first reading.
Ordinance number 2020-30, entitled Ordinance Amending Ordinance number 2019-85, Permanent 2020 Appropriations by transferring funds within the general fund, transferring funds from the general fund to and appropriating funds in the Port Authority Fund and declaring an emergency.
Discussion on this ordinance.
Yeah, Mr. President. Gail, also came through Finance Committee last night and for discussion, and this appears to be what we discussed, or 112 coming from the general, for the unappropriated general fund, and the 78,000 coming from the mayor's contractual services fund, for a total of which is now 190,000, which we thought last night would be 200,000. That that's basically. So if anybody else has anything, feel free to add.
Okay, anybody else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
this is Brian Trish.
okay.
Just to keep this flowing, this one needs to be passed as an emergency. You put the money, you said you're going to give them the money. Now I have to be able to do it.
Right.
What you see in this motion is the various transfers that need to be made to do that. So I would
That's-
need to pass it in emergency.
And that is correct, Brian. Thanks for that.
Okay, I need to suspend the rule. We're ready for that.
Mr. President,
Mr. Triplett?
we're gonna have to wait and see if the court is gonna agree to administer the money the way we're talking about here.
We've already passed the first part of
Yeah,
it.
I understand that. But, you know, it's all up to them if they're gonna decide to do it or not.
I agree with.
If you put these funds in place, it doesn't mean if they don't agree to it, you just don't cut the check.
Right.
That's fine. I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I'm just saying, because it's a check, it's a purchase order process that gets this to a process where there would be a purchase order and a check cut. If they won't agree to it, there would be the money would be there, but there would be no finishing the process.
If we don't pass this, the whole thing stops.
Yes. If they
Correct.
agree.
Okay, with that said, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules on ordinance 2020-30 and go to the final reading.
For the motion by Mr. Triplett, suspend the rules. Do I hear a second?
Ken Bodkins,
Mr. Bodkin seconded. Roll call.
Mr. Triplett,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins,
yes.
Ms. Earlston,
Yes.
Dr. Fellner,
Yes.
Mr. Ivy. Mr. Ivy,
Yes, sorry, I was on mute.
yeah, Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Baldinger,
Yes.
Motion to suspend the rules passed by 7-0 vote. Discussion on the ordinance.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to pass ordinance 2020-30.
For the motion by Mr. Triplett, second.
Second.
Second by, who was that? Mr.
Balding.
Mr. Baldinger. Okay, discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Triplett,
Yes.
Mr. Baldinger,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins,
yes,
Ms. Earlston,
Yes.
Dr. Fellner,
Yes.
Mr. Ivy,
Yes.
Mr. Richard.
Yes.
Okay, that passed by 7-0 vote too. Moving on to ordinance 2020-31, first reading.
Ordinance number 2020-31, entitled ordinance amending ordinance number 2019-85, permanent 2020 appropriations by transferring and appropriating funds from unappropriated funds for the general fund and health department funds and declaring an emergency.
Heard the reading of the ordinance, discussion. Mr.
Yeah.
Bal-
Carl, this is Mr. Baldinger again. This also comes from finance last night, which unanimously agreed to support this, this funding for the health department to do a contact tracing. There's also in this ordinance here, as I was reading through it, right underneath the heading in that first section, it'll be section 2, 3. We got 2 3s and then a 4. And the language just keeps, I don't know if it's supposed to repeat itself or it's supposed to contradict itself like this. But we got 2 3s and I'm totally confused what this ordinance is supposed to, how it's supposed to.
Okay, the numbering should be 4, 5, and then 6. And that was my error.
Why do we keep reference $50,000 with different fund numbers? I don't understand.
Well,
Gail, if Mr. President, I should say on that, we have to transfer some monies to the appropriate funds to lines to get those transferred to that. We have to put it into the health fund, then transfer it, and then transfer it from our fund to the health department. It's the logistics way of doing it. If you will need, Mr. Baldinger, I believe, an amendment to correct the section numbering. The second section 3 should be section 4. Section 4 should be section 5, and section 5 should be section 6. I hope I didn't stumble too bad on that.
Ordinance, this is just multiple transfer from fund to fund to fund.
If I may clarify, part of that is moving the cash and part of it appropriates it to the expense account. That's why you're seeing it listed multiple times. You have to move the cash into 230 and then appropriate it to the expense fund. So we're moving it from the general fund to the cash fund of 230 and then into the expense account of 230.
Right.
It's just like when we did the appropriation for it at the beginning of the year.
Right.
Okay, that clears it up for me. I didn't realize that it was a process like that, all designed in one ordinance, which is fine, and that clears it up. But yeah, like I said, we're going to need to have a motion to amend these section numbers. So I'd like to make that motion to amend these 2 section 3 numbers to make it section 3, 4, and 5. Is that correct?
And 6.
yeah.
Okay, you got a motion by Mr. Baldinger to amend the ordinance, motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Ivy.
Okay, Mr. Ivy seconded. Roll call.
Mr. Baldinger,
Yes.
Mr. Ivy,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Triplett,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins,
yes,
Ms. Earlston,
Yes.
Dr. Fellner.
Yes.
Motion to amend the motion is passed by 7-0. Now further discussion on the ordinance.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules and proceed to the final reading on ordinance 2020-31.
What's
can
the
I ask-
50,000 for?
Excuse me, what, who was speaking there?
What's the
Or-
50,000 for?
Contract contact tracers in the health department as mandated by Board of Health. Trish, obviously, you're the person to answer that question.
Mr. President, you have a motion on the floor, right?
We have a motion on the floor. We need a second. Suspend the rules.
Well, we never got the second, so we don't want to, well, yeah, okay.
We need a second on this, or it dies for lack of second. Voter's motion?
I'll repeat my motion. I want to make a motion to suspend the rules on the amended ordinance 2020-31 and proceed to the final reading.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. That's Dr. Felder made the motion. John, do we have a second?
I'll second. Ivy.
And Mr. Ivy seconded. Roll call.
Dr. Fellner,
Yes.
Mr. Ivy,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Triplett,
Yes.
Mr. Baldinger, sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins,
Yes.
Ms. Earlston.
Yes.
Pass 7-0. Now, ordinance discussion, further discussion on that.
I think that's really important as we maintain our local health department, that we give them the resources, the tools, if you will, to get the job done. And this is a very important component. I guess I'm echoing a little bit. I apologize. It's a very important component, and I believe that waiting on the state to supply people to come up and do the contact tracing on people in the city of Galleon that may test positive. I think that is indirect, slow, and we can and will do better. And as somebody is identified in our health district as positive, we'll have the resources in a contract person or a part-time person that can get right on that. And so I think it's really an important part of our mission at the local level is to be able to support we can't do much about testing. That is a state or a federal thing, but we can certainly mobilize and have a quality contact tracer when somebody finds himself in that unfortunate position of having a positive test. So I know Trish and that group will do a good job with the money. It's critical that we hire a real quality person so that they can get us timely and accurate evidence. But waiting around for some other jurisdiction to send to someone or the state to send to someone is not the kind of response we want to have. So anyways, I'm glad the rules got suspended, and the sooner we get the money to the health department, the sooner they can have a new shiny face up there doing that contact tracing for the inevitable future positive test.
How much contact tracing do we actually have to do in the city?
Well, I don't know how many we've got now, Trish. Well, every time we have a new person identified, that's when that person will be, I don't know, what's the right word, snapped into action, called into action.
Trish?
I'm not sure if Trish is still on there or not.
Yeah, I can address that. So, it's going to ebb and flow. It's going to vary based on the individual that is confirmed or a probable case. So, right now you may have somebody that's maybe come in contact with 3 or 4 individuals. Okay, maybe they stayed at home most of the time, but they went out here or did just 1 or 2 things. And so their contacts are minimal. However, we do have some individuals that maybe have 20 to 30 contacts. So they've come in contact, they've gone out and about a whole lot. So, however many people somebody comes in contact with, when they are confirmed, that's going to determine the level of work, the workload that our contact tracers have to deal with. And so with more and more businesses reopening, more and more people are coming in contact with more individuals. So the contacts are just going to continue to escalate. So that's where we have to prepare and plan for things like that. So I did have just a couple quick questions because this was a relatively brief conversation yesterday in finance committee and such, and having seen the actual resolution, I did just want to verify because we had our Board of Health meeting at 5 o'clock today. The board did not make any determinations because we did want to gain some clarification from council in regards to this prior to them making any motions. So the way that the language is written in here, it looks like the funds would go into contractual services, other technical services. And we wanted to verify, number one, if the city is requiring as a term of receiving these funds, that it be an actual contractor and not any additional hours from maybe an intermittent nurse that we already have on staff or part-time staff, more hours, things like that maybe already have access into some of our systems and would require slightly less training. If there were any restrictions in terms of that, obviously without a written agreement, we just want to clarify those types of things. And then also if there is any additional costs that kind of come in along with contact tracing, whether it be some additional IT expense. I'm trying to think off the cuff here, some of those types of things, if those would be okayed with this type of fund. Again, there's a whole lot that goes into this response. Contact tracing is one large piece that it's nothing new to the health department, but this is a much larger scale. But we're also looking at, a whole lot of hours in the enforcement side of enforcing orders and everything along those lines. So we just want to verify that if these funds are for contact tracing, specifically if the city is requiring that this be a contract contact tracer, that's a tongue twister there, or if you are relying on our expertise to hire and do this the best way that we see fit.
I still have a question.
Absolutely.
How much contact tracing have we actually done?
I cannot tell you the exact number right now. I can tell you currently we are monitoring somewhere between 20 and 30 individuals, which means monitoring signs and symptoms twice a day for each individual. So considering approximately half of our cases are now recovered, that's pretty hefty.
Mrs. Earlston?
Yeah, just to clarify, so between 20 and 30 individuals, each one of them needs to be monitored twice a day.
Correct.
Okay, and right now you are using your staff to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
And this is 7 days a week. We don't get weekends off for this.
And that's not really the tracing, that's kind of just the monitoring. Then there's actual tracing where you have to actually track down and find the people that could possibly have been exposed.
Yes, it's all encompassed in contact tracing, because what we then have to do is when we monitor signs and symptoms for those number of days, if somebody at some point spikes a fever or starts becoming symptomatic, that's when we have to determine whether or not they get tested or whether or not they are just deemed a probable case because they have come in contact. We know that they meet all the criteria. They're now a case. Then we have to go back and trace all of their contacts again at that point.
So, Brian, Mark, did you get your question answered?
Yeah, I guess, Tom. I'm
Okay.
just thinking here, the state's doing an awful lot of that.
Brian, did you want to answer the question or with reference to I'll take a swing at it and then either concur or add or subtract from it. Well, the money will go into contract services. As you know, your Board of Health has control once it's within, what is that, 230? Is that what they are?
Yeah.
230?
That's the
Once
new
it's in
fund line.
230, the board can do what they want, okay? The ordinance, I think, speaks to itself. So if you're intending to have fidelity to the ordinance, it says contract tracers. I think that gives you some direction. The other way I choose to answer that, the question you ask of us, if that's the right word, Trish, is I don't really want to be encumbered with an intermittent employee with vacation and sick leave and any kind of termination if they leave once the hours back off. I really think that we're better suited to have a contract person whose duties are defined, and when we don't have any more, they go away, and we don't feel that obligation that you do as an employer of trying to keep that person on. Last thing I'd say about it is that, I mean it in a positive way, that all eyes will be on this effort. And I think Mark's questions kind of get at, if there's some skepticism, we want to make sure this is worthwhile. And if the person comes on and you do, the money is put there, you do hire a person and they are involved in public relation activities, like they're charging to be at a third Friday, that kind of stuff, I'll see it right away, and you'll have to pull me off the roof of a building. I don't want to see that. This is so important that I don't want those dollars squandered on an individual to just be visible in the community or to be used in things other than direct contact tracing and the purpose that I think the city wants to put these dollars to. So I don't want them running around doing other stuff. I'm not saying that, but the people will keep an eye on this. And if we aren't using it, then there's probably, will reduce the odds that it would be included in the 21 budget. Long answer, sorry.
No, that's fine. It helps me gauge a little bit more. Like I said, it was a lengthy discussion at our board meeting, and we wanted to make sure that we received some of that feedback again, because there wasn't a ton of back and forth discussion yesterday.
You and Tina and Emily are wearing, you're running at both end or burning both candles. You're doing 7 days a week of tracking these people down. That can't go on very long. Tina needs to get back to what the contract pays her to do primarily and be engaged in that. So we need a talented person to come in and be at the point on these newly identified cases.
Yeah. And I will say, I know that there have been some questions about the contact tracers that the state has, because again, that's really been out there in the news, obviously.
Yeah.
A lot during the press conferences. The contact tracers that they've hired right now, currently, I believe, don't quote me on this, I think they've hired 3 tracers and 3 supervisors for tracers at the state level at this point. The teams that they're setting up with those tracers are going to be able to be requested by locals, but not for day-to-day contact tracing, not for things that are relatively small when you look at in terms of the scope of what a large outbreak is for the state of Ohio. We're talking probably a couple hundred people. So those folks would only be on site or working remotely for locals for things like a large outbreak, not the regular tracing and tracking people down and that type of thing. So when we hear about that on the news, it's not something that we're really going to see here unless for some reason we have some major outbreak, which, knock on wood, that's not in the cards. But yeah, that's really what the state contact tracers are being utilized for. And
kind of a recurring theme. I couldn't agree
for
more,
us to
Trish.
request that yet.
Yeah. There's a recurring theme here with contact tracing and just about everything from A to Z in terms of COVID response. Theme here. If you want it done locally, if you want it done, you do it locally. If you
Yep.
want to talk about why it's not happening, then rely on the state, rely on the feds. It's kind of the theme of this meeting. We're going to take care of our own businesses. We're going to take care of our own positive people. We're going to take care of ourselves. Quite honestly, we're 9 weeks into this. Really, no one's looking out for Galleon except Galleon. Let's just be honest about it.
One question, Trish. Did I hear right that the state had 3 supervisors for 3 people?
33.
33. Okay, I'm glad we started like that.
And that's at this point. Apparently there were about 5,000 applications for those contact tracers that they were hiring through the state, and that's just who they've hired thus far. I don't know how many they're expanding that to, but that's just what we have right now, and they're not trained. They're going through training and everything first. So even if something were to happen in Galleon tomorrow, anytime this week or early next week, basically it's us. This is what we have. This
Absolutely.
we can request some help maybe from the county health department, some of our surrounding health departments, but again, they're swamped with their own things too. So the mutual aid agreements that we have in place with surrounding health jurisdictions, in instances like this, yeah, they would do their darndest to help. I don't doubt that, but everybody is deep into this. So it does make mutual aid very difficult to even reach out for something like that. Again, any little bit does help, and trying to determine the best methods by which to do so.
What about training for this contact tracer?
Training. So there are a few online based trainings for contact tracers. A lot of it is, here's a user manual to utilize this system. Here, follow me along. I'm going to show you exactly how to do this. Listen in on this call, how I call this individual, and run through a script. Those types of things. A lot of what is not truly something that can be trained is the kind of the mental health aspect. So making sure that somebody's aware when you get this kind of news, it's not good news. So being able to break something like this to somebody over the phone, and or talking to somebody about everybody that they maybe came in contact with, that they maybe put at risk. Some people can be extremely distraught. So that's not something that's very easy to teach. So that's something that we would really have to filter through the applicant pool in terms of that. It's very sensitive. So, people that can answer some medical based questions as well. A lot of people have questions in regards to, well, I have this underlying medical condition. Should I be looking at this differently? Should I be looking for this kind of sign or symptom? Should I report this one? Should I report muscle aches? I have fibromyalgia. My bones and muscles always ache. So do I report that or not?
Okay. So it won't cost any more money than for training.
No, none of the training is at cost. It would be our staff time to train, and or the hours that it may take that individual that's hired to go through the trainings, but no additional separate outside training costs that we are aware of.
But one of the things if I might make one more comment on this topic, is that this is another example where having Avita and I don't know how many 800, 900 Galleon area employees, a couple thousand in the area, that provides a network of contacts, relatives, friends, people who might be in a position to have some background. And so I'm hopeful Trish will be able to get in, work with the infectious control people over at Avita, and perhaps identify a candidate or two that as Mark's saying, they would come ready to go. They would have training and some experience. So while I don't have that on my draft board list, so to speak, I do believe there's reason to hope that we'll be able to flush out rather some candidates through that Avita employee network.
I couldn't I couldn't agree with him more on that, Mayor. That's probably the route to take.
So good. So anyways, it's, I get it, Mark. I don't want to throw the money away, but what I'm afraid will happen is that if we have a little bit of a flurry or a spurt, that we'll get behind and in a way that we'll have trouble sustaining or getting ahead. I don't know this for certain, but I understand that the county health department, because they've had a little bit more of a spurt lately, is not current with their contact tracing. I believe we were, the last time I checked a few days ago, pretty much current. I don't want us to slip behind, and that's why I thought it was important to get the money there so we can get a person in place before we burn out our 3 people who are doing most of it now, and then bring in a quality person to get us through the next at least, 7 months till the end of the year. Then we'll see where we're at when it comes to 2021.
I will say too, all of our staff, we utilize a tracking system for our time. We're down to every 15-minute increment, showing what kind of program we're working in, what kind of tasks we're oriented in. So, that's something all of our funds and such are very closely tracked. Again, down to 15-minute increments in terms of the task type that we're doing. So that's something where these funds, we can try to track them separately in our spreadsheets and such as well, just to show, what we're actually utilizing it on, how much, how fast maybe we're burning through it when there's peaks that we're burning through it due to an outbreak, something like that. So that's information that we can definitely filter through, like police, fire, and health subcommittee meetings and things along those lines to say, we're not running through this, quite as fast. We're not gonna utilize all of this. So that type of thing.
We'll just shortchange you next year, Trish. If you don't spend it this year, we'll just take it off the top next year, okay?
Don't tell me that.
just joking. It's been a serious meeting. No, I think there'll be plenty of accountability. If we don't use it, we'll know it. And but it's that cliche about a pound of prevention or ounce of prevention, pound of cure. I think that really might be apt if we have someone on it. We can prevent the spread when we have a spurt, sometime in the fall of the year, whenever it comes back to bug us or haunt us.
I really, this contract tracing is something fairly new and something that is just getting started. And I think we got a long way to go before we're clear of this virus. So I really think it's time gone that this is going to multiply out and from
absolutely. And in all of our conversations with the state, we're looking at 12 to 18 months worth of this.
So it multiplies out. I mean, you have one person to say with 5 contacts, and in fact, each one of them people has only got 5 or 10 contracts. You see how that's going to it's going to grow.
It multiplies very quickly.
Julie, we do have a motion and a second on the floor, don't we, for the original or the motion on the ordinance itself? Back a while.
No, I don't think
Carl,
so.
thanks for remembering.
No, we don't have a motion yet.
We suspended the rules.
I think you've
Yeah.
got a motion, but not a motion.
We did. We didn't have a motion on the ordinance itself?
We did the amendment and then the,
Suspension.
yeah.
For discussion.
Let's call the roll.
Okay, do I have a motion then to approve the ordinance?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance 2020-31.
Okay, you heard the motion by Dr. Fellner. Do I hear a second?
I will second. Ivy.
Ivy seconded. Now, any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Dr. Fellner,
Yes.
Mr. Ivy,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Triplett,
Yes.
Mr. Baldinger,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins,
Yes.
Ms. Earlston,
Yes.
Ordinance passed by 7-0 vote. Last one is resolution number 2020-10, first reading.
All right, last one for the day. Resolution number 2020-10, entitled "A Resolution Approving and Ratifying the Prior Acts of the Department Heads and Safety Service Director and approving a then and now certificate for said expenditure and declaring an emergency."
Discussion on this?
Just real quick, Mr. President, this is a then and now. We need to pass this as an emergency on this. We just missed this one, frankly, and needs to be taken care of. It's for the police and fire pension fund, and it's an annual, and it's in the budget. We just need the appropriate, then and now passed.
Any questions of Mr. Trish on this?
Yeah, Brian, this is just the appropriation to go ahead and pay the $4,000. Is that correct?
It's not an appropriation, it's just a then and now, Gail, yes.
But I mean, it just authorizes you to $1,000.
Right,
Okay.
Let us get it paid, and we need to get it done quickly.
Okay, any other discussion? If
Mr.
not,
President, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules on resolution 2020-10 and proceed to the final reading.
the motion to suspend the rules by Dr. Stoneman, second. Earlston. Which one? Mrs. Earlston seconded it. Okay, roll call.
Dr. Fellner,
Yes.
Ms. Earlston,
Yes.
Mr. Ivy,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Triplett,
Yes.
Mr. Baldinger,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins.
Yes.
Okay, passed 7-0. Resolution, any further discussion?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion, to pass resolution 2020.
Okay, Mr. Richards make the motion, seconded by
Second.
Mr. Triplett. Second. Discussion? And roll call.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Mr. Triplett,
Yes.
Mr. Baldinger,
Yes.
Mr. Bodkins,
Yes.
Ms. Earlston,
Yes.
Dr. Fellner,
Yes.
Mr. Ivy.
Yes.
Okay, that passed 7-0. Now, moving on to other business, committees. There's a couple set up here. Two of them set up, police and fire and finance.
Yes.
Anybody, Mr. Baldinger?
Yeah, I believe, see,
The 20th.
May the 20th, am I correct, Julie?
Yes.
May 20th, the finance committee will be meeting, probably on Zoom, I would hope.
Yes. Yes.
7 PM.
Okay, police and fire. That's the next night, isn't it?
Yes. May
Okay,
21st.
anything else on committees that you see we need to set up a definite committee or just play it by ear? Guess we play it by
Like
ear.
by ear.
Pardon?
As far as parks are concerned, just play it by ear.
Okay. Any other comments on any of the other committees?
For law and ordinance, same thing, Carl.
Okay. I'd be the same thing on the rest of them. Okay,
So is the police, fire and health then meeting on the 21st?
Yes.
Right, okay.
yes,
Right.
By
I-
Zoom. Yeah.
Yeah, I have that down. Okay, good.
there's only two scheduled, okay?
Right, right.
Auditor Trish.
Just real quick, a couple things. I'd like to extend my thanks to Eunice and Julie. We turned a lot of legislation from last night's meeting into actual legislation today, and the mayor alluded to that earlier, to thank them to get it done. So thank you for their efforts on that. The second one is to, we are watching the revenue. It's doing much better than I had anticipated. We are actually in very good condition on that. And just finally, the office and the auditor's office is now reopened. We've ended the work at home and moving forward on that. I'll be glad to answer any questions from anybody over the next week. Thanks.
Any questions of Mr. Trish besides what he said? If not, Treasurer Sparks is still, I don't see him, his picture. Is he still on, Julie?
He's on by phone. Treasurer Sparks?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't unmute myself.
I unmuted you.
There you go. I just wanted to say thanks, Julie, trying to get me on this meeting, and thanks for all the work the auditor's office has done. Just to let you know, there was, I don't have it in front of me, but almost $5 million in the checking account. We have $2 million in a side account. All of that funds is available in 48 hours, so we really don't have a cash issue right now. And I wanted to, thanks for all the council members' due diligence on all these. I know we need money for the contract tracing and getting money for the Port Authority. And the one comment I wanted to just add, I think we did all the good diligence on those two. The one on the credit card, the mayor said that, there's 4 pages worth of bad stuff. I wanted to just say that we, as a council at that time, accepted hand-typed financial statements that was totally unrecorded. With the council we have now, with the mayor that we have now, I don't foresee any of that happening. So, I might have somebody screw up here and there, but to do something like that, I would not think that we would do that. So that's it I got to say. And thank you for my absence the last couple weeks. So thank you.
Hey, Rod. Law Director Palmer?
The only thing I have to share is that I've been sweating bullets here over the last couple of minutes because my iPad is draining down to 0. So I may not make it through the mayor's remarks. Sorry about that, Tom, but if I go black, you'll know why. There you go. Nothing else.
Nothing else? Okay. Mayor? Muted, is it?
He is muted.
Pardon?
Beth, I'm sorry, I was muted. I don't want Thomas to run out of gas. 4 things quickly. Avita, there will be media information out about the money that the city and the Freeze Foundation sent for the preparedness. What they bought is an ultraviolet cleaner, and they're using it to clean out cruisers and ambulances when there's a suspected corona person or whenever they believe there may be some contamination. So it's good news, and I think everything that we can continue to do to build that partnership relationship with Avita is a good thing. There is a drone copy that I think Matt can send you of the new bike path. That's probably the best way to view its progress without trespassing, but it is moving along quite well. We've had a couple change orders. I think that's to be expected, particularly when you're building in a transportation improvement, even if it is just a trail in the middle of an area that's had no other development. So we've had some drainage issues, but feel pretty good about it and are managing those change orders within existing resources. If you didn't see Saturday's paper, haven't been through Heisey Park, head through there. Strickler Enterprises did an excellent job in getting that cabin back in place. It's interesting, just want to say, sort of joking, that we got a lot of assistance from citizens that were frequently coming up here and telling us how we need to get the cabin done. I think it's been done for about 4 or 5 days now. I don't think any of our frequent visitors have been by to tell us how awesome it looks. So, Rich Henry, if you're out there, come on up here. We'd like to congratulate and high five you. Oh, I can't high five, but it's great to get that done. I believe today we received notification from the Veterans Group. They've decided to postpone the Memorial Day Parade. They will be meeting next Monday, the various Veterans Group, to come up with a way to recognize fallen Galleon area soldiers sometime through the summer. And we'll see what the 4th of July holds for us in terms of community celebrations or events. So the Memorial Day Parade is down. We didn't talk about it tonight, but some of the changes that you all passed assisted in freeing up some dollars, and we have come up with a real solid plan to handle the local share on the Harding Way resurfacing project, and we'll have roughly $230,000 to $250,000 for other paving yet this year. So that, just to give you, we'd prefer to be paving between $400,000 and $500,000. So this year's paving program will be a little bit reduced from what we've been able to get put into the system the last 3 or 4 years. So the week of Memorial Day, we're going to celebrate the stay-at-home order going by constructing that bathroom down at Heisey Park. So late this month, early next month, you'll begin to see the extension of the water line and sewer line to the site, and then the installation of a new restroom there in Heisey Park. So those are, I think, 3 or 4 things that are going on right now. Tomorrow, I hope to have a little bit of feedback from the EOC about the health departments. That would be the Emergency Operations Center, COVID, to talk a little bit about the disc golf course, seeing whether or not there's a timetable or some things that can be done to improve the health, the healthy nature, or make sure that there's enough sanitation going on out at the golf course. So anyways, that much more. Really appreciate the work that council did. I think I'm hopeful that we'll be able to work with the Port Authority to come up with a good management arrangement. I think the idea of getting $180,000, $190,000 out there in the very near future for local businesses is something that we'll all be glad we've done 6 months or a year from now. So I'll stop at that point. Thank everybody for their attention. A lot of hard work done today. You know, and I guess I'm really a stiff when it comes to my coworkers. I guess I never say thank you to them because they never do anything. They don't work hard, but no, seriously, they've done a lot of stuff. Most of what ends up on council comes through the service director and through the mayor's office. So while there are a lot of bouquets thrown out to various city employees, I really don't believe council understands how hard the mayor's office staff works. And so we'll make it a point of emphasis to point that out whenever they do something right. So anyways, a little bit tongue in cheek, but they're doing a great job, and I wanted to thank them as well. Thanks, Mr. President.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions of him?
I got one question, Mr. Mayor. Will Charles Street be open by Christmas?
Yeah, I believe, that is, everybody who's been out there is going a little bit slow. But all of the easements and all the work that needs to be done on the paper side is there. And, we're going to bear up. We've got the other half of that, Mark, since you didn't ask this question, working real hard in trying to make sure that we have a plan to get all of the residents who will now have, and businesses that will now have a sewer, get them in a position so they can tie into the sewer. So that's part B of the Charles Street project. So it's just, that's just the first half of it, but yeah, I'm glad that we have someone running the service department that has many years experience as a contractor, because they can talk the same talk, and and Andy Muntis has got their attention. I feel pretty positive about the way that project's going, even though it's moving slow, Mark.
That's it.
I'll make a motion.
And I'll second it.
But I thought he was asleep up there, but motion by Mr. Triplett, second by Mr. Olson to adjourn. What time is it, Julie? About 9:34, 23, I mean?
9:24.
24. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hey, opposed? Hey, you're all awake. Good night and good luck and stay safe, okay?
See everybody soon. Take care.
We'll take it.
Aye.
Bye now.
Bye.
Okay.
You'll be there in the morning, right, Julie? I'll be up signing.
Yes, I will.
I guess we're all signed off.